you very much for your help. Oh,
Thank you, Greg. Hey, good evening, everyone. Today is Wednesday, May 27th. Time is 6:32. Does somebody want to make a motion to call the meeting to order?
I'll make a motion.
All right. Excellent. Joy made the motion. In second, looks like it was Tom. Up, Cassie. Perfect. Okay. Excellent, excellent. All right. So, do we want to do the Pledge of Allegiance like last week? Or I'm sorry, last
Yes,
month?
we
Okay.
do.
Excellent. All right. Ready?
Oh,
I'm not like you.
gotcha.
I'm not like everybody else.
There we go. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America and to the
to the
republic
republic,
for which it
which
stands,
it stands,
one nation,
One
Nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
under
God,
God, indivisible,
visible,
with liberty
with liberty,
and justice.
justice for all.
for all. Thank you. All right. We have public comment. Public comment?
None received through the Parks and Recreation office.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. None. Minutes from the previous meeting. Has everyone had a chance to review?
Yes. And I'm ready to make a motion to approve them if everyone has had a chance to review them.
I have
So
to
I'll make that
abstain.
motion.
I wasn't there.
Hey,
I'll make a
John.
motion to approve the April minutes.
Excellent.
Second.
Second up. We have Cassie and Tom as well. Approved. Okay. Excellent. Director's report.
Thank you. So I'm going to be very short and sweet in these reports going into the beginning of the meeting. So just to give you an idea of how I've been using my time since we last met, spending a lot of time attending webinars and gathering information in order to help us make the best decisions. So I've been going to webinars offered by the Connecticut Parks and Recreation Association, the Office of Early Childhood, the American Camping Association, and then some different aquatics branch meetings. So trying to just really gather and help form some good decisions for the town going forward in the short term for the summer months. We are happy to report that we did open the Williams Park tennis courts for play this past Saturday to a very grateful, receptive crowd of usual players, and the reservations have been pouring in, a really great response to that. The boat ramp has been open for a few weeks already. We are now staffing it on the weekends and checking for passes. Again, we did issue do not duplicate keys this season with restricted cylinder, and we are giving out numbered stickers for passes to allow us to track better. So we are definitely trying to make efforts on our side to make sure that people are using the ramp who have purchased the passes. And then one of my goals for the short term in the next few weeks, once we get summer programs settled, will be to start gathering information on the loss of program revenue that our department had from a result of all the cancellations, with the goal of presenting that either to KERMA or to FEMA to see if we're eligible for any kind of a reimbursement for those monies on behalf of the town. And that's my hopefully fairly brief report.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Thank you, Mary. Thank you. Recreation Supervisors report.
So I'll go ahead and speak on behalf of Dan. We had offered a few different virtual classes for the spring. Some were well received. Two that are currently running are two ballet classes that we have, one for preschoolers and then one for school-aged children. We're also hoping to offer a Cut Your Cable class in June virtually. Dan is starting to work on e-gaming leagues, so they're popular with a lot of other recreation departments in different parts of the country. And so we're looking into them to offer a virtual social opportunity for kids if we can't connect with them in person. We're looking into trying to offer something for them, through gaming. And so we're hoping to offer those over the summer and then to build on them in the fall, with the idea that the social distancing requirements might be coming and going for the next months or a year. We want to have something in place that we can go back to and continue to offer for the age group. And we're also thinking that we can hook up with the football club and the baseball club and connect with those same kids that enjoy those sports, and then offer them a virtual option as well, so they compete on the field and then off the field through gaming too. And then Dan's been busy working on how to adapt camps and programs to the guidelines that are being set forth by the CDC and the health department. And one of our main focuses on how we can really use our outdoor spaces for programming over the course of the next few weeks, understanding that outdoor spaces seem to be the safer option for the short term at least. And that's my report on behalf of Dan.
Okay, thank you. Monthly financial report.
The Park Supervisor, thank you. Brian.
Oh, I'm sorry. The Park Supervisors report.
Okay.
My bad. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's all good. So Chris and the Parks Department have been really trying to take advantage of the time that things are closed. Usually we don't have closed facilities for this length of time. And so the Parks Department has been focusing some efforts to make improvements on things that we can't usually access during the time of year that we would need to access them. So, as an example, some work at the Huckleberry 90 baseball field. We're still hopeful that there might be a summer or fall season for baseball, and so we want to make sure that the field is in good shape there. The farmers market, we understand or believe that the farmers market is still going to proceed for the summer, and it's going to be relocated to a new area on the town hall property that was cleared over the winter. We've been applying more grass seed and making sure that that is ready to go for the timing in June when that opens. And also aerating and seeding the soccer fields at Town Hall, along with the Wiskinier school fields and the baseball fields. So normally this time of year, it's really hard for us to get to work on any of the fields located at the schools. But again, we've been taking advantage of the opportunity to try to do our best when they're closed. And that's just a little bit of a glimpse into the life of the Parks Department over the last few weeks.
Any questions for Mary on any of those three reports?
No?
All right. So how about the monthly financial report now?
Sure. So from monthly financial, I can tell you that our finances are in very good shape. There are certainly expenses that we have not been incurring as a result of facilities not being used to the same extent that they typically are. So we're realizing some savings in terms of outsourcing that we have for restroom cleaning, as well as for garbage pickup. So we should be in very solid shape for the end of the fiscal year.
Okay.
Brian, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, John.
Mary, I just had a quick question. Where is the new location for the farmers market? Is it over by the entrance to the brush dump?
It's thank you, John. It's actually almost directly across the street from the post office.
Oh, okay. Where there used to be that parking area, kind of in Scout shoes. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Right across from there. Okay. That's a good spot. It's kind of, you can get away from traffic and the entrance to town hall.
Yeah, I think it's a great spot, and parking can be in the back lot of town hall, and people can walk right over. So I think they'll have great success at that location.
Nice. Okay, thank you.
So moving on to old business. First line item is budget request fiscal year 2021.
So really no update at this point. Again, we're just waiting for the Board of Finance to vote on the budget, which I understand is happening in the next week or so. And so more to come at our June meeting, either in person or by Zoom.
Okay. The next item is Department COVID-19 response virtual spring programs.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
So, so basically, excuse me, my tree allergies are acting up these days. Basically nothing really new to report from last month. We're just continuing to make sure that the signage and the caution tape in any areas that are closed remain marked as closed for public use. We're doing our best to answer any questions from the public in terms of what facilities are opened or closed and the reasons behind them. We'll continue to work with, with our department and the Emergency Operations Center and other town agencies in the reopening of those facilities as deemed appropriate. And then for our virtual spring programs, I basically touched upon that under Recreation Supervisors report. Really nothing to add at this time.
Okay. Beach, boat, and tennis fees.
So I left that there. Certainly boat and tennis fees are able to proceed as we agreed upon at our last meeting. The beach fees, as we discussed at our last meeting, we said that we would revisit them as necessary once we had a better idea of when the opening date was. I kept this here under old business because I don't feel like we're quite ready to have that conversation. We don't have that firm date yet. So what I would like to do is to, once we have that date established, to rework some budgets and then to run them by you. It would be based on percentages of hours that have already passed of potential use versus what's currently existing. So we'd be using the same guidelines as to how we came up with our original fee, just reducing those by a certain percentage. So if everybody's fairly comfortable with that, I feel like I can manage that internally and perhaps send that out to everybody, just so you're aware of it and you can make any comment or voice any concerns, and we can discuss. Is that reasonable for that?
Mary, I think
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Mary, I had a question for you. So how are we managing staff that would work the beach over the summer?
So, so right now, the staff does not have a report to work date. We have hired already our supervisors back on. They're the ones who are manning the boat ramp gate for us on the weekends. And again, staff is ready to come back on once we have an idea of when our operating is going to begin at that facility. So everybody's been, pretty good. Of course, our college students are very anxious to get back to work, but under the circumstances, everybody's being very understanding that we just don't have enough information to give them firm answers, at least not up until this point. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we'll have much better information to let our staff know.
Thank you. Okay. Shall we move to new business?
Sure.
Summer programs. Summer
that's the
programs.
big-
Yeah, it is a big one.
That's the big one. Yeah, that's what I meant.
So I'm glad you can't see me drinking my diet soda at my desk. I'm not quite sure how best to manage going through this. We were trying to figure out a way of really defining what our attempt is for the summer, and really in our actions, it was really clear to me that what we're trying to do is we're trying to create community at people's comfort levels. So we recognize that people in town and out of our town, but people in our town are coming to us from many different points of comfort. Some people are very comfortable having their kids go to summer camp. Some people wouldn't consider having their kids go to summer camp. Some people are comfortable with a half-day camp, not a full-day camp. Some people are more comfortable with a virtual camp. Other people are saying, oh, my kids have been glued to their computer. I don't want them anywhere near the computer screen.
Right.
And then we also have, our adults who are probably in need of some socialization and some opportunities for social gatherings and for exercise classes and things like that as well. So our real goal is to just try to present a body of programming so that people can pick and choose what feels right to them, because everybody is coming to us from a different point.
Do you want to go through it topic by topic, what you said this morning as far as the different areas, Mary?
I'm happy to go through and kind of give a brief overview of each, if that might be the most efficient.
I would do that, Mary. There could be some areas that we may have to vote on tonight to send recommendations to the, I'm guessing the Board of Selectmen, Health Department, whomever. So as you go through it, I would suggest to everybody, if there's something that, needs to be discussed or you disagree with or have a different idea, that would be a great time to bring that up. And then hopefully we can leave this meeting with some agreement among us to what recommendations we'll make. Does that sound like a plan?
Yes.
It'll work.
Okay, so thank you. So right now we're looking at a camp season to either begin the week of June 29th or possibly the week of July 6th, really depending on how quickly we're able to get our information out to the public in order to allow for adequate time for registration before the programs begin. And at that same time, we're also going to be, finalizing our protocols with the health department. I do want to be very clear that we are doing nothing or even attempting to offer anything unless we're clearly able to follow the guidelines of the CDC as viewed by our health department. So we're certainly not looking to bend or break any rules. We want to follow any rules that we're supposed to be following in order to provide the safest experience possible, and that goes across the board for anything that we're considering for the summer. So basically, we're looking at a potential 6 to 7 week camp season. One question that we've been tossing around a little bit internally in the office is, normally we offer only 1 week sessions. We've always done that because we feel, well, not always, for the past 10 or more years, we've been offering 1 week sessions. We feel it's a convenience for parents so they can pick and choose amongst many different camps. This year, we're thinking, maybe the 1 week session doesn't serve us quite as well. Maybe there's more value with us having 2 week sessions, having the same group of kids with us for 2 weeks at a time with the same staff, a little bit less in and out. There's a lot of talk about kind of creating those bubbles or those pods. It might be a better way for us to manage doing that with the 2 week sessions as opposed to 1 week. We've not really decided on one. I know colleagues that I respect have gone to 2 week or 3 week or even 4 week sessions this camp season for that very reason. And so something I think it's worth considering, in terms of pricing, anytime that somebody is having to pay, twice as much money at the same time, of course, that might be a concern for some people too that we need to weigh. But my personal opinion would be I would prefer us to offer 2 week sessions. I do feel like it's the consistency is just a little bit more important, and I would have a higher comfort level. Not to say that we couldn't offer single week sessions, but I think the 2 week session just feels a little bit better to me for our typical camps like our half day camps and our Camp Catacopia. We'll be talking with our health department and verifying exactly what they want us to do in terms of health checks for staff and for our campers every day. Basically, what we envision that happening is that we're going to be doing, temperature checks and then a series of questions for wellness at every day, anytime staff or campers arrive at the campsite. And those of us who have kids, I kind of liken it to when you call your doctor's office to get a flu shot, they go through that series of questions about have you ever had a reaction to eggs, and it's going to be much the same kinds of lines of questioning about symptoms, family members, or potential contact, in order that we know and that people are kind of just mindful of their contact with other people before they come to camp. We'll be doing that for staff as well. We do have infrared thermometers already in stock. We already have PPE that the Emergency Operations Center got for us, so that anybody who is doing that temperature check will have the proper PPE. And, what we envision is that we would be doing these checks for campers when they're still in their vehicles with their parents, thinking about, drop off this year. Parents don't need to get out of their cars. They're not going to be coming onto the campsites. And that we would be able to, if a child, answered any of the questions in a way that suspected that perhaps they were not feeling well that day, or that they were running a temperature over that 100 or the 100.4, that they would just continue to remain in their car and go home for the day. for all the camp programs, the 6-foot social distance is going to be maintained. Some different communities are requiring an additional waiver for COVID-19, like specifically acknowledging the fact that there is a pandemic and that, participants are accepting the responsibility and the knowledge that they're entering into a program in a pandemic. We would have our camp staff wear masks, and the campers can wear masks at parents' request, but it would not be required of them. We'd offer additional hand washing, access to hand sanitizer, frequently cleaning and disinfecting surfaces. We'd coordinate with the Board of Education for using the school. So since we would be using the school for a half-day program, we would just make sure, in fact, I was talking to Dan Caldwell just a couple of days ago. They just recently got their protocols for school cleaning and disinfecting, and we'd be following that same protocol for the summer as well. We'd be taking precautions like putting craft supplies in boxes for single use for the kids, no sharing. People will be bringing their lunches from home, and even dividing up equipment bags. So we have a unique equipment bag for one camp group that we could go ahead and sanitize and disinfect, but only those 10 kids and 2 counselors are the ones, coming into contact with it. So those are basically some of the overviews that we're thinking for just across the board for camp. With that in mind, we're not comfortable offering anything for the age 3.5 to 5-year-olds. So the Camp Pee-wee program that we normally offer, we would suggest canceling that for 2020. Not because that we want to, but because we feel that it's in the best interest that we do that. We just don't feel like those children are old enough to understand social distance, and we don't want to put them in a situation where they wouldn't be successful.
Makes sense.
We would feel comfortable offering the Camp Summer Better Than Others program, which is our half-day program for kids entering grades 1 through 5. And I'm not sure how much people have been watching and following the CDC and the OEC guidelines coming down, but basically the current guidelines say that you can have a maximum of 30 children per site. So our site would be at one of the schools. We usually have Huckleberry Hill School. That might change this year, but assuming we're at Huckleberry Hill School, we would have up to 30 campers. We would have 3 groups of 10. The 3 groups of 10 would not intersect during the camp day, and they would remain with the same 2 counselors for each group throughout the camp experience. We'd be looking at offering longer duration drop-off and pickup times, so that way people wouldn't, be bumping into each other. A little bit more social distancing would be possible. And again, we'd be replicating the same thing in the afternoon with bringing the child out to the car for pickup. We'd have each group would have a classroom as a home base. We can arrange the room to allow for social distances, and in keeping with our theme of moving outdoors as much as possible, we would certainly make use of the outdoor spaces as much as we can for games and activities. No off-site trips, as I understand, bus transportation. I don't know if there's been an official ruling, but it doesn't seem like a reasonable thing for us to even consider at this point in time. And that's basically the Camp Summer Better Than Others for the half-day program. Anybody have any specific questions about those before I go on a little bit?
Mary, it's not so much those in particular, but you actually triggered a thought with the, allowing for possible additional registration time. Do we actually have to hit a minimum number to offer these various camps? I know we haven't had to deal with that in the past, but is there, in other words, if only 5 people register for a particular camp or a particular week, would we consider canceling it, or does the show go on no matter how many register?
Yeah, thank you, Brian. That's an excellent question. So, so under these circumstances, we would, when we set the budgets, we would try to set the budgets so that way we would assume that we're going to get at least 10 kids. Like I would hope that we're going to have at least 10 kids in order for us to offer the program, and then kind of base the budget up from there. So, but to your point, yes, if we only got 2 kids registered for a program or 3 kids, and we were not going to be able to come close to covering our costs, then yes, we would have to cancel a camp session. And And I think that's reasonable under the circumstances, and hopefully we would be able to offer them a different option.
Oh, makes sense. Can't run at a loss.
At least not a significant loss. You know, sometimes you can make decisions. If you're not talking about a large amount of money, you can make some decisions. But if we're looking at large numbers, we certainly don't have. I would not want to go down that road and start losing money. I guess I'll end there.
So Mary, are you going to talk separate about Camp Voyager? Because I do have a question there.
Sure. Yeah, I'll do a quick overview. So Camp Catacopia is usually the one that runs at the Cadogan Pavilion, grades 3 to 6. Typically that runs from 9 to 5. Typically we're able to offer field trips off-site 2 to 3 times a week. And because of that, we have no access to outside field trips. We want to really limit the amount of time at camp, so we're suggesting really a 9 to 3 camp day with the half an hour before for drop-off and a half an hour after for pickup. Would run basically the same 2 pods of 10, 1 pod at Cadogan Pavilion, 1 pod across the street at the town beach in the lakeside room, and the groups don't intermingle during the day. No offsite trips. Because of the outdoor nature of the camps, we would have to institute some different policies this summer in terms of needing to cancel and have parents pick up if we have prolonged thunder and lightning. Usually between the hours of 9 and 3 that doesn't happen. It's usually later in the afternoon, so we're fairly confident that wouldn't happen often, but we would make sure that parents knew that ahead of time. And for this particular camp, really the start and end dates of when we can offer these camps are very much tied into when the beach operation is happening. And so we would need to keep that in mind for our planning purposes. And then for, yeah, of course.
I have a quick question. When you said the 2 groups, one would be at Cadogan Pavilion, one at Town Beach. If we go with a week term, is it possible that that can switch so there's a little variety for each group? So in other words, one group isn't under the pavilion for 2 straight weeks and the other group the beach house. The other concern I have is that you might have parents saying, I'll sign my child up, but I want them in the beach house or whatever. Is that a possibility? We could probably clean very well in that weekend in between.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And in fact, the two groups just can't intersect, but there's nothing to say that one group's not going to go swimming and the other group's not going to go to Cadogan to use the fields. So, so there would be movement between the 2 sites, but in terms of where the home bases would be considered, they would be considered, 2 separate sites there. And they would be their indoor locations in case of any kind of rain. In the EOC guidelines, you need to have an indoor rain plan in case you do have bad weather for outdoor camps. And so that would be, we would consider one would go into the pavilion, one would go into the room. If I had to make a plan like right now, depending on enrollment, I would probably choose to keep the younger kids in the room and the older kids underneath the pavilion.
Makes sense.
So Camp Voyager. So Camp Voyager, as people probably know, is our typical field trip camp. Every day they get on the bus and they go to a different location. And so of all the camps that we offer, that's just one that we can't possibly offer in the same manner for 2020. And so we're planning to not offer Camp Voyager. So we sat down and we said, okay, well, if we can't offer that for Camp Voyager, what are some options that we have, that we can offer to them? And one option that we came up with was that we can have more of an outdoor-based field trip. We can rely on parents to drop off their child at a different park location every day, Monday through Thursday. We can still do some hiking, some nature activities, some team-building activities. They would still have that social experience. It could all be done within Brookfield. And so that's kind of where we're focusing some of our efforts right now for that grades 6 through 9 age group. And we're also looking into some virtual movie watch parties. A lot of times the kids really enjoy doing that on the bus rides on the way to locations, and we thought that would be a way for them to continue to have that social interaction virtually when we can't have it in person for the summer. And then for the counselor in training program, just really quick, I learned through one of my webinars that counselor in training volunteers would need to be counted as campers in your camp group counts. And so if we chose to have CITs, we wouldn't be able to have 10 campers in a room. We would have to reduce our camper count. And so for that reason, we thought it was best to have our counselor in training go virtual this year, and we're actually already working on a different program to have it meet once a week, working on different leadership skills and the things that we would cover normally, just through a different avenue through meetings over the computer. But I think it's a great alternative, and what we would love to do is if restrictions are lifted such and allow, we would love to get our CITs together, toward the end of the season and be able to do some kind of culminating activity with them. Any questions in general about any of the kind of regular camp programs?
Not for me.
I don't think so.
So moving on to sports camps. So sports camps are kind of a harder area because much of what we do in sports camps are practice sports, and much of sports are contact sports. And so what we're really at right now is we're kind of going camp by camp and trying to determine what camps can be modified in order to offer them in person. When we modify them, we understand that we have to reduce our maximum numbers allowed. So we could only have 10 kids in a gym for basketball camp, as an example. At 10 kids in a gym for basketball camp, is it going to be affordable for people? Is it going to be desirable for people? Are kids going to get the kind of experience that we would want for them, or should we consider to go virtually? And so really that's kind of how we're looking at all of these different sports and specialty camps. And, we've learned through the OEC, the Office of Early Childhood, that in order to be defined as a camp, that it has to offer a meal period. And so any of our sports camps now, to be called a camp, are going to have to include lunch or breakfast, and most likely that's going to be lunch. So we're also looking at, how do we extend those camp hours to include lunch to be considered a camp, or if we're going to be able to run them under program guidelines. And so there's a little bit of a gray area right now for interpretation that we'd be working closely with our health department with to make sure that we're making the right choices. But, things like ballet camp, we're pretty comfortable. We think that we could offer a ballet camp with social distancing for 10 kids. That's kind of like a normal camp. Basketball camp, probably not. Tennis camp, I think we have a chance at tennis camp. There's some USTA guidelines that are in place about kids don't necessarily pick up any balls unless it has their name labeled on it. There's some really creative ways of making sure that children only touch what's unique to them. Golf camp, possibility for that same reason. Equestrian camp, possibility. Flag football, not looking so good for the summer. And then the multi-sports through Skyhawk, again, depending on the sports that are chosen, it's still possible. And so we're planning to kind of go through those still with the idea of saying, okay, what can we do to possibly offer them of value, and if it makes sense, and with the health department. And then for other specialty camps, it gets a little easier. STEM camps that we normally offer in person are fairly easy to turn to virtual programs. And art camps are not difficult to turn to virtual programs, and also possible to offer through EOC guidelines fairly easily. One program that we usually have is a full-day art camp. It's pretty easy to move that to an outdoor location and to allow for social distance. So those are basically all of our camps that we're considering at this point. And, in talking to lots of different agencies, there's lots of different park and rec departments who have chosen to not offer camps this summer. I don't know, honestly, if it's a decision made at the department level or at the town level. There are other departments that are offering camps this summer, and then there are also private camps that are still going forward with camp this summer. And so what I've learned is that, everybody is really coming into the camp season and making decisions that are unique to their circumstance and their ability to provide this level of service. And I think some people are shying away because of considered risk in offering it. And other people are saying, well, there's a risk inherent in anything, and we still think it's the right thing to do to offer something. And again, kind of getting back to that continuum, there's a continuum of opinions on what is or isn't reasonable to offer at this time, or even in the next month or two going forward.
Sounds like something in there for every comfort level, as you said at the onset.
Yeah, I think, in talking to a lot of people, again, that's really what resonated with me is that people just are coming from many different places, and all are valid, and that we're just trying to make sure that we have an opportunity for anybody who wants to participate to be able to participate.
Yeah, I think I like the idea of offering what you can while maintaining social distances. I think a lot of people want their kids to get out and do something if they're comfortable with it. Like you said, some people are and some people aren't. And I think personally, I would think a lot of people would want to have the virtual experience because that's what they've been doing for the last 2-3 months with school. But I think it's good to offer it if we can do it safely and within guidelines. And people are going to sign up if they're comfortable with it.
You want to move on to the beach, Brian, since that's a biggie too.
Yeah. Yes, please. So any other
Okay,
questions on the
so-
camp? Okay, let's go to the beach. Thank you, Mary.
I'd love to go to the beach. Thank you, Brian. All right. So in thinking about beach operations, suggestion would be for us to cancel swim team and swimming lessons for 2020. Again, not because we want to, but because they really both rely on hands-on instruction, and they're challenging to offer under the current guidelines. So if we were to choose to cancel those now, we would be able to keep the docks that we typically use for the programs out of the water and actually increase our beach frontage. And so, I'd like to think that the town beach is going to be well used this summer, and people are going to choose to want to come and go swimming and enjoy a local facility. It would also allow us to have a dedicated area for camp. So instead of having our swim team and our swimming lesson area to the far right of the beach as you face the water, we could actually have that be a camp area and still allow the other parts for public. We suggest some other communities are not putting out their floats and diving boards or slides. Again, due to social distancing, the capacity is really going to be about 2 people with a lifeguard. If we don't open it, we're going to be able to reduce our staff required, which would be able to allow us to keep our pass fees at a more reasonable level. I think it's a reasonable step to take for this summer. We measured the beachfront recently for another reason. We're looking at purchasing some additional sand. And so, again, going back to the social distancing guidelines and the guidelines that are out there, there's guidelines for different amounts of feet in between beach blankets and then walkways and things. So just very generally, if we were just to kind of cut, in our minds right now, 18 swaths from the wall to the shoreline of the beach, and each are about 15 feet wide. We could have one group at the wall side, one group at the water side, and we could have about 36 groups of people in total. That might go down just a little bit once I account for the lifeguard chairs, but say between 30 and 36 groups total at the beach. And so those would be groups of 5 people or family units, so about 150 people on the beach we'd be able to accommodate. I think that's pretty good. I feel comfortable that most of the time that our capacity would not exceed that unless the use this summer is just significantly higher than what we've seen in the past. And that doesn't even speak to use of the upper park. So again, if we have those walkways down to the water, people could still have their belongings and their home bases, so to speak, on the picnic tables in the upper park, and still be able to go swimming in the water. Right now, opening dates for waterfronts are really, even locally, are all over the place. There's not a lot of agreement. I would suggest that we should discuss perhaps Friday, June 26th as a target date. Again, that would be totally subject to approval by our health department. The reason I suggest that date is because we are expecting that open Connecticut Phase 2 to begin on or around the 20th. Even if it's a couple of days delayed, if it's a week delayed, we would be right about at the week delayed point at that time. I like the idea of opening on a weekday versus a weekend. I think that's going to give us a little bit of an ease or a transition in. And then the operating hours, we had discussed at our last meeting wanting to do consistently 10 to 6. Once we run the budgets, we might need to do a little bit of tweaking to that, but again, I think that's a reasonable place for us to kind of go into our conversation right now with the understanding that we might need to adapt as necessary based on use or financial reasons.
Great.
Hopping down just a little bit. If capacity does become an issue at the beach, our backup plan would be to institute a reservation policy. Some communities are doing that preemptively. I really don't feel like we need to do that in Brookfield, but we would be prepared to do so if the demand was there. Basically, what some communities are doing is having like a morning and an afternoon slot and people really reserving one or the other of those, so we have a real good idea of who's going to be at the beach when. Other communities are breaking it down even more so than that and doing a couple of hours, like a 9 to 11, 11 to 1, 1 to 3. I like the idea of maybe the morning and the afternoon as our second stage if we need to, and then go on from there. I'd hate to kind of pigeonhole families into a 2-hour slot unless we didn't really have any other choices.
Right.
So some questions for consideration, and these questions don't necessarily need to be answered tonight, but I think we need to start thinking about them in terms of how we're going to approach the summer. Is, typically we allow Brookfield residents to purchase season passes. That always happens. We also typically allow Brookfield residents to purchase daily guest passes at the gate. So right now, the town does not really want us to be handling cash. We can certainly do non-contact credit card payments at the gate. We can work on that. We do have the technology. We can also consider if residents can only purchase daily guest passes through the Park and Rec office, or if we should require season passes this year. Something to think about. Other things to think about, should we allow our residents to bring guests with them? And if we do we have a cap on how many guests they may bring? I've seen information from other communities outside of the COVID with their capacity restrictions, but some communities on a normal summer will only allow a family to bring up to 5 guests. And so it's something I think that we don't have in our policy currently, but that might be worth some discussion this summer especially. And the last item would be, many years ago already, we started marketing our town beach to Bethel residents because we had the capacity to have families from Bethel. Bethel has no waterfront. We were able to get more revenue and more use, and it was a win-win for Bethel residents and for us. Now we need to kind of sit back and say, okay, well, can we continue to sell those Bethel resident passes this year? Or is this the year that we have to say, I'm sorry, we'd love to have you, but right now we need to limit it to only Brookfield residents? Or if we say we're going to start the season with only Brookfield residents, and then a month in, once we have a better idea, maybe then we can open it up to Bethel residents if the interest is still there. So some policy considerations, I think, and again, we don't need to have specific decisions on those tonight, but we would definitely need to have those in place in the next 2 to 3 weeks before we open.
Is there a way to,
Go ahead. Mary.
Yes.
Oh, how many Bethel residents buy season passes? each year around?
You know, Tom, I should be prepared to answer that.
Okay.
If I had to make a ballpark estimate, I would say about 15 families. It's
15
not a
families.
huge
Okay.
number.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I think you should still give them an opportunity to. I don't think it's fair to them, but I do believe there should be a cap on residents bringing guests. One per resident or something like that. But I mean, if a Bethel resident has been using the beach for the last 5 summers, and then all of a sudden we tell them they can't use it this year, I don't think that would be fair, actually.
I wonder if there's a way to, Tom, or Mary, to see how many people sign up for season passes in Brookfield, and because we have a reduced capacity at the
Right.
beach now, and
Right.
then say in 2 weeks, if there's still open spaces, then we offer to Bethel. I mean, we don't want to exclude Bethel, but we also don't want to exclude Brookfield residents by having Bethel
Right.
call in 2 days earlier. Maybe you have a certain time frame that you got to sign up as Brookfield, and then they make the decision that you can offer to Bethel.
Well, she's not limited in the number of season passes we're going to sell, really, John.
That's true.
Okay.
Yeah. That's true.
Mary, do you usually get a sense for season passes? In other words, do folks usually sign up within a 2 or 3 week period and then we're done for the summer for the most part? Would we be able to get a sense if we could include Bethel residents a couple of weeks in, if you were to judge it on past years?
Yeah, so the challenge of this season is we typically start selling beach passes in April, and then our beach usually opens in June. And so now the season or the opportunity for people to purchase passes is very much shortened. And so I hope that we're going to get a flood of people wanting to get their beach passes immediately upon when we start advertising them. And maybe once we do that, maybe a realistic goal would be to say, July 1st, we'll consider selling to Bethel residents. Or we also always, and we say this no matter what, we always have the right to cap the number of Bethel resident passes we're going to sell. So we could say, okay, well, at the time, we're going to be selling, 10 or only to past purchase or pass holders. That might be a reasonable option. We're not going to sell to anybody new, but we would honor if anybody's already had one with us. That might be one way of managing it.
Right.
We might say, or we could pick a number. We could say, okay, we have 15 passes for Bethel, and then we'll reevaluate on July 1st. We'll start a waiting list, and then on July 1st, if we still feel like we can accommodate more, then we can open it back up. So, but I do agree with you, Tom. I mean, I would hate to take away a service that we're providing our neighbors in Bethel. As long as we can continue to meet the needs of our residents, because of course our residents are the ones that we need to meet first, and if we can still service Bethel, I'm totally on board with including everybody as usual.
Okay.
How are we going to handle if, say, you buy a season pass and then you go to the beach every day, you can't get into the beach because of capacity? Like, would it almost be easier to just sell daily passes or no?
That's a great question, Renee. So, I guess in some respects it would be easier because we would have the capacity and we would just turn away people that day who once we reach capacity. Like, so it's very logical in terms of thinking about it like that. From the other side, from the staffing perspective, that would be an awful lot on our gate guards that they're not typically used to managing. And if we're trying to avoid a lot of contact at the gate, that would be harder to do under that system. So there's good and bad in both, but I like that line of thinking. I mean, you open it up every day and say, okay, the first 150 people here, will, come on in, give us your $10 and enjoy your day. That's a whole different way that I wasn't even thinking in.
That would be hard to manage staff, I would think, though, as well, because if you have passes, you have the revenue to hire staff members. But if you do a daily pass, and I see Renee's logic in doing it, but if you do that, you really have no way of knowing what staff you need on, or in order to pay for that staff throughout the summer.
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing about a season pass is that it kind of equalizes our revenue throughout the course of the summer. So if we have a rainy summer and we don't have people wanting to come to the beach every day, but yet we still have staffing costs, then those season passes will help us pay for those. To your point, Joey, the daily passes are very much weather dependent, and we see that fluctuation already. On the beautiful days, the gate is extremely busy, and on other days, not as much. And so we may not capture the revenue that we need for staffing if we went that direction.
I'm more worried that you might not have staffing on that particular day. Where if we have season passes, we know we have the revenue to hire, what we need. Do you
Don't
find
you
that
staff it the same regardless? Don't you staff it the same regardless? You have the same number of people?
We do, Rob. Yeah, you're right. I mean, because we can't predict either with season pass holders or with daily pass holders, we can't predict the number who are going to arrive on any day, and so you do have to staff the beach at normal staffing capacity every day. The exceptions would be if it's going to be an exceptionally hot and humid 100-degree day, you're going to bring in extra staff so you can reduce your rotations. If it's going to be a pouring rain day, you might be able to have somebody go home, but typically you're staffing the same every day.
The other problem with in making a daily pass, but some families would make it not economically feasible. You have 4 kids, one parent. Even if you just charge them $5, it's $25 a day. And they go every day. They've already hit their season pass in a week. You know what I'm saying? You can't. People need to buy that season pass. So, with multiple kids, right?
Yes, people would definitely have a savings if they go more than a couple of times.
Right.
The season pass is definitely the best deal.
Yeah, I mean.
So, Renee, that might help your concern, because if someone can't get in 2 or 3 times, they're still way ahead of the game. If they complain that they bought a season pass and it's to go each day, to Tom's point. But Mary, is that capacity? I think you said earlier 36 sort of groups down on the sand. Would that be a typical day, and then not counting up above as well? Would that be?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the 36 groups on the sand would be a busy day for the town beach.
Okay.
It would be like one of our busier days, and again, it's hard to predict behavior for the summer in terms of people's usage of parks. We've seen, a huge surge in use of open space properties and hiking that we would not have ever predicted last year. And so because of that, I say that, last year and, historically, I feel like the capacity of the beach for, say 36 groups or 30 groups of 5, say 150 to, 175 people is going to be more than adequate. And I would suggest that, once we open, we'll probably get a good idea of if it's adequate or not based on usage pretty quickly. And if we need to move to that reservation system, we're going to be prepared. And I think that even in our information that we're sending out to people, we've been doing this basically with any of our passes. We're saying this is where we're starting. We reserve the right to make any kind of changes to the amount of reservations, number of reservations. I think it would be reasonable for us to say that this is uncharted territory, and that we expect that you're going to be able to go and use the beach whenever you'd like. And a lot of other people are going to be using the beach this year, and we're going to be, watching and making sure that people have equal opportunity. And if we find that people get to the beach and they're getting frustrated because they can't come in, and it's happened more than a couple of times, well then we'll have to switch to a reservation system, and people will have to plan ahead. And that way we can do a better job of equalizing those opportunities for people. And I think that would be reasonable under the circumstances for this summer. And our goal would be, next summer, hopefully we're not under the same kinds of restrictions and it'll be a very different experience. But I think that it is important to make sure that everybody is getting that equal access to the town facilities who would like it.
Okay.
Also, just to kind of bring everybody into the loop about the concession stand. So concession stand, we had heard from our past vendor. We've been very fortunate. We've had a vendor in there for the past several years. They let us know last fall that they were not intending to return this summer. I was actually working with Jerry Gay, the purchasing agent, back in February, working on an RFP to send out to get a new vendor. And then everything started shutting down. And again, it wasn't really the right time to be sending out an RFP in the middle of March for concession stand services at the town beach. So we've held off on purpose. Right now, I'm not really sure. A lot of the state beaches are not opening concession. I'm not sure how quickly that's going to ease up. I don't know if it's even reasonable for us to try to get a vendor in there. So, my suggestion is maybe we get a little creative for this year and we engage with, Ice Cream Man or some other kind of, food truck delivery to come in and allow people the opportunity to purchase drinks or ice cream or beverages, and maybe keep the concession closed for the summer might be the right way to go.
Yeah, I was thinking like the food truck, like the who's the barbecue people who are always by the cornfield there, like something.
Mike Gallup.
Something like that.
twins-
You could have a food. Twins,
Twins,
something
yeah.
like that. A local food truck, right? You could do something like that, right?
That might be.
Yeah,
our
I mean, we
best
could,
Okay.
kind of do something fun. We could potentially do like a food truck Friday, ice cream day Tuesday. I mean, we might be able to do kind of make it into a fun activity.
Okay.
I think that's when you got to just play it by ear,
Right.
and if it's okay to start doing it, or even just going to Costco and buying chips and soda and having it staffed by one person, then that's fine. But that's a play it by ear, I think.
John will get your cooler. You can walk the beach.
yeah. Well,
We used to do that at Point Lookout. So.
yeah.
Mary, is it like just all packaged food, canned soda or juice, chips, like someone suggested? Is it possible? Is there a staff member that's there
The meat people.
handle or not really? If it was very simple,
So truly, I would have to defer to the health department on this one because for a concession stand operation, there are food license requirements. So I would need to check into that. I know that prepackaged food and beverages are certainly a little bit easier to sell, but I'm not sure. I don't want to misspeak.
Yeah, I'm not sure we'd even be allowed to do that, to be honest with you. Like I noticed that we've shut down all vending
Amy went to
machines,
sleep?
everything.
Oh, walk.
So I don't really have anything else to add about the beach, but I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody may have.
Could I ask a question? And my apologies, I fell asleep. I'm sorry. Joining you guys late.
We didn't notice.
What are you doing about the bathrooms at the beach? If you could just, one sentence.
Okay.
Thank you. So our intention would be to keep them open and to limit capacity. If we needed to do that, mask would be required for bathroom use.
We were thinking in Reading of having, a spray bottle and wipes for parents' comfort level. I don't know if that's something you considered.
It wasn't. That would be fine. You know, our staff typically goes through the bathrooms a couple of times a day anyway. So I feel like our lifeguards would be, you know, and/or supervisors would be able to kind of go in and do some sanitizing on a more regular basis this year. But of course, I mean, we could certainly leave cleaning products out for people, and maybe I can leave some out of my house. And no, I'm kidding. But yeah, for sure that we would do whatever we could to make people more comfortable using the facilities.
If
Can
you're
I
going
make
to
a comment about that? There is a marina in town that's having issues of members stealing the wipes off the walls. So I'm just afraid that if you were to leave supplies behind, I don't know how long they would
Paper
last.
towels and a spray bottle. The state parks are going with no bathrooms at all the state parks. Bathrooms are closed at every state park that's a beach.
wow.
I think that's going to be revisited June 20th, and our beach isn't open till then. I don't know if that's going to continue all summer, Rob.
Okay,
From
I
what
just
I
wanted to let you know that that's a choice they made that I wouldn't want to
Yeah.
make. But having you know, antiseptic spray, because you can't get the wipes nowadays, but having some
Right.
cleaning things for a parent to go make sure the bathrooms are adequate, because you know, every hour or so it's not the same, you know. So that's
Oop.
anyway.
Well, Rob, what are the state parks going to do if people are there for 8 hours and the bathrooms are closed?
They're telling people not to do that. They're telling
wow.
people to think about it, keep their visits short. If I've read their entire posted statement that they
Yeah.
released 2 weeks ago. They actually released it like the Wednesday before they opened.
Okay. And Mary, if our bathrooms are going to require masks, then people have to supply them themselves, or is that something that Parks Rec is going to have there, where people might potentially just want to, you know, take a bunch of them home, you know?
Yeah, no, we certainly wouldn't be leaving masks out on the counter or anything to that
Yeah.
point. But you know, I think that most people now do travel and bring masks with them, and so you know, it would be reasonable for the town to expect that when people are coming into the beach and they're going to be interacting with our staff, if they can't maintain that 6 feet distance, that they would have a mask with them on arrival. That of course, children would not be required to wear them, but the adults would be. And so you know, we would just do our best to enforce that mask wearing by the adults and the 6 foot social distance for the kids. You know, I don't see the bathrooms being a huge deal. The bathrooms aren't so large, and we also do have one thought that went through my head is we do have that family restroom that's separate from the other bathrooms, and so the potential exists that we just open the family restroom at first, see how that goes, and decide whether or not we're going to open like the additional bathrooms inside of the building or off the building at a later time. So I don't like the idea of doing porta potties at that site. I'm kind of on the mindset that I would much rather people be able to use the actual bathrooms, and that I feel like we have enough staff and enough people around that we can you know, do our best to keep them as clean and sanitary as possible.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mary, do you want to move to concerts now?
Certainly. All right. So for the concerts, thinking about concerts in the park is one of the, you know, the mainstays of Brookfield Summers, and Phase 2 of Open Connecticut is expected to happen on or around June 20th. At that time, outdoor entertainment is going to be considered capped at 50 people, and outdoor amusement parks are going to be allowed to open. Our summer concerts are tentatively starting on June 26th. We might delay by a week to start on July 3rd. Right now, just to give you an idea, I'm contacting the bands. I'm trying to get a feel for their comfort levels that we've already booked. And depending on what they're telling me, we might need to make some changes, assuming that we go forward. Also, right now, checking with the bands about their openness to having a virtual virtual option, because I do think that the only way that we can really offer the summer concerts is if we're able to include a virtual option for people who are not on site to attend. So I'm in the process of contacting bands and trying to flush that all out right now, in fairness, which is also a very big piece of this, along with I will need to have conversations with sponsors, make sure that sponsors are aware of kind of how we're choosing to manage things, and that the sponsors are on board and feel like that they're getting their money's worth, because again, the whole series relies on sponsorship revenue. So basically, my idea kind of going into this is, okay, so we have 50 people, and this is all subject to approval from a health department and interpretation of guidelines on their part. So if we have 50 people in front of the bandstand, we also have, as everybody knows, 3 soccer fields and then a baseball, softball field on site around the bandstand. So if we consider each one of those a unique entity, we could theoretically have 50 people in front of the bandstand, 50 people on the horse field, 50 people on Upper Patak, and then 50 people on Lower Patak, or any combination thereof, or a limited combination thereof. So, just trying to think of how we can allow for more people to safely social distance in smaller groups of 50 and still be able to enjoy the experience of live music, even if they can't physically see the band. The other thing that I've been thinking about is, our senior population. I feel like we need to try to do something for our seniors who may not feel comfortable intersecting with wider sections of our population, and perhaps thinking about only a senior-only parking area in the senior center parking lot, somehow making some distinction to give folks who are a little bit more vulnerable a little bit more of a comfort level, should they still choose to want to come out in person and enjoy the live music. In order to do something like this, again, with approval, we're really going to need to delineate the areas. We're going to need to make it very clear to people to make sure they're going to the right area upon arrival. We're going to need support from the police department, perhaps some volunteer organizations for parking, for bathroom use, which of course, where people are going to be on site for, probably about an hour and a half to 2 hours. Bathroom use, we can consider a couple of different options. One would be to keep our main bathrooms open and to have monitors there, again, limiting one person or family unit at a time for male and female sides of the bathroom. Another thought that I had was we could actually have a portalet on each one of the fields for the summer concert, so that group of 50 people would have their own single portalet use and not have to really travel off of the site. So I think there's a lot of creative ways to think about how to have a safe event under guidelines. But again, at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is that we're in compliance with the guidelines as they're written. And so it could come back and we might be told, well, 50 is 50 no matter if it's on 4 acres or a half acre, and we need to be prepared for that answer, and to only have 50 people on site, and then to have more people enjoying it virtually. But I can't speak for anybody in the commission. I know that personally, I've been enjoying some live music, live streaming from some of my favorite bands, and it's been just such a gift just to listen to that live music. And I think that even if people are only enjoying the summer concerts virtually and in meeting in smaller groups with their own families or with smaller groups of friends on their own properties, I think there is still some value in the community aspect of the summer concerts, even if people are far apart. So I guess that's kind of what I have to say about summer concerts.
Mary, the summer concerts, the intent is not to have people assemble in groups greater than 50. Imagine if the Xfinity, I can't even say it, Infinity Theater said, we're going to have 50 people in each section that normally holds 150. So we're going to have 400 people by having 50 people at an outdoor concert in each section, right? I don't think that's what they had in mind.
No.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in
They could've-
fairness, I've not been to that theater, but I understand what you're saying is that, I guess it's subject to interpretation, and I'm respectful. Again, I was just trying to think if it's a reasonable ask, and it may not be. And I'm okay with that. I'm not trying to do anything wrong. I'm just saying that if we have people sitting on 2 soccer fields at opposite sides of the park, are they 2 separate soccer fields or are they the same park? And I think that, that's worth asking the question.
And I think that
Understandable.
Mary, I think that's a great way to try to accommodate more people, because so many people do enjoy the concerts in the park. But I think it would be really hard to police that. I think if you had 50 people by the horses, nobody's going to stop 10 people from walking down in front of the bandstand to watch the band. So I think that would be really hard to do, although I wish we could make it happen. But
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it would be a management nightmare as well.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
agree. It would put too much pressure on some groups, because I could just see, my friends, and like, wait, we have to stay in this spot. We can't go to that other area with our other friends.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be tough.
Yeah, and I think even limiting it to 50 people by reservation, maybe it will work with having the virtual option where people want to invite a couple friends to their house and they can watch it virtually. Maybe that would work, but it's a hard
You
thing.
could rope off sections. Mary, have you had any thoughts on allowing movie nights this year?
Thank you, Sue. Honestly, I have been a little nervous about the idea of movie nights, just because we can't actually see behavior. The summer concerts are during daylight. The movie nights are all at night. And so I was thinking that this might be the year to forego movie nights, or to possibly think of a drive-in movie option when people actually
Right.
remain in their cars.
Okay.
Right? That's what I was
They-
thinking, a drive-in movie,
That's
right?
fantastic.
Drive-in movies are very popular this year.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
They are. We're one opened last week, and it was sold out every show the first night. Yeah.
Mary, I'll go
Yeah,
back
no,
to
people-
that group and let them know your thoughts. They were asking me last night, so I can let them know.
Is Emma still have the puppy?
Thank you, Sue. I appreciate that. They've been on my list, but I appreciate you. And if we do end up going with a drive-in option, I can reach out and see if there's interest.
Great.
Oh,
That there would be, yeah.
I mean, where would you do? You would do it in the town hall parking lot? Would that be the option, or?
Your house, Tom.
Thank you. Everybody in my driveway.
So,
High school would be good.
The high school would be an option.
Okay,
Did
yeah.
a little research a few weeks ago, and without talking specific locations, it might be something that would be better if we had our residents travel to a nearby town. There might be a better facility for us to host Brookfield residents close by that's not actually located in Brookfield. So I wouldn't necessarily only look at Brookfield locations. I
Okay.
might be looking at around the area too.
Okay.
So just so I have some clarity on the concerts, if I may. So the general consensus would be that that people would feel that it would be too hard to enforce distancing and people remaining in separate areas, and that we would want to concentrate on perhaps having a group of 50 or whatever the number allowable is per the governor's order, because we do expect that to change throughout the summer, and that we would offer a virtual option to other residents outside of that number. Am I understanding kind of where everybody or most people are coming from on that?
I would agree.
Yeah. Now, how would you limit the 50 reservation? They pre-register for that?
You'd have to, I
Yeah,
would
so
think.
Okay.
Yeah. So we would have to get a little creative. There are a few different ideas that I had. One would be that we have people contact us, give us their top 4 concerts, and we try to get them into their top 4 concerts. Another way is that you just do a random drawing every week. There's programs that can just basically pick people out of a hat, and you can contact them and let them know, and they will have a piece of paper to show at the entrance to town hall in order to gain access. I mean, there's a few different ways of approaching it, which I think, with town hall only having that one access point, I think it would be fairly easy for us to enforce. But again, it's hard because I do anticipate the demand being greater than the capacity for that. But hopefully by the end of the summer, as restrictions continue to be lifted in phase 3, maybe we'll be up to 100 and potentially more, and then we can encourage people to still spread out further past the bandstand and onto adjoining sites at that point.
One thing is, I know when churches have always had that 50 person rule, but they have the benefit of perhaps adding a second service, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know the bands play for an hour and a half, right? I don't know if maybe 1 hour and 15-minute sets, bands might be willing to play 2 sets. Could get 2 groups of people in. Just a thought. I don't know if it's a good idea or not.
Could be hard to get people in and out.
Okay.
If it was an hour. I don't know if a band would be worth their while for a 2-hour delay in the middle of each session. It's a good idea, but I don't know if it's going to work.
Most bands, play in bars for like 3 hours for nothing. Most of the band.
They come in drinks.
I know. I'm just saying, and our concerts in Reading are for 2 hours, and we roughly pay the same you guys do for an hour and a half. Maybe it could work, maybe it couldn't. Just wanted to throw it out there.
Yeah, I mean, Rob, it's a really interesting idea, and maybe I can talk to a couple of bands and just see how that would affect their fees. Maybe there's enough room for a buffer. Maybe we could have like a matinee, and they can have some dinner, and then they could stick around for the evening show. I mean,
yeah,
it's definitely worth
and a
talking
7
about.
o'clock show. 5:30 show and a 7 o'clock show. I don't know, half hour.
Yeah, and you have once the group leave, they take their break and eat, and then the next group comes in. It's possible, maybe.
Yeah.
Not a bad idea.
Worth an ask.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only one thing I would say, Mary, if you're gonna reserve it for 50 cars, 50 families, right? But you're gonna reserve it for more than that, because when it's something for free, at least 10 to 20% are gonna say they're coming, but they don't show up. So you're never gonna be at capacity, right? Am I correct about that?
Tom, I agree. And normally when we offer free events, we do buffer in that percentage of people who pre-register. We do. In this case, we're talking about 50 people, not 50 vehicles.
Okay. You're right. Okay. All right.
Yeah. So
I don't think you could buffer it because then you'd be over.
Yeah.
That's the thing, and and truly, some weeks we might be 49, and some weeks we might be 52. But I think the intention is there. So.
Okay.
May I speak to facility rentals for a moment?
Go right ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, so normally this time of year, our facility rentals are bustling. Cadogan Pavilion, Lakeside Room, and the Bandstand. We typically take reservations for groups of up to 50. Looking at any one of those facilities, there's no way that we can have a group of up to 50 and allow them to socially distance at any one of those sites under or within the facility. So right now we've already had to cancel reservations through June 20th because the maximum number of people allowable per group is 5. We are expecting that to be relaxed by the governor on June 20th. We don't know what that next number is going to be. But at this point in time, we can really consider just not accepting reservations for 2020 and just saying there are too many unknowns. We're going to have to re-clean the rooms that we're using for camp theoretically, if we're using them for camp, on the weekends, and then again before camp starts, and that perhaps it's just a better way of avoiding to avoid the reservations for this year for those facilities. Or I would suggest that maybe we say, a revisit date would be sometime like August 1st or beyond. By then, we'll have a better idea over the next month and a half of what things are looking at. We could, put tentative holds on dates, no promises to people, and then actually call and go forward with reservations, assuming that restrictions are relaxed by the end of June, or the end of July. Sorry.
I like that idea better than canceling for the whole year. But I would probably suggest we cancel through the camp sessions, which would be, I think, about the third week in August. But after that, without camp there, and we also have the benefit of more time to see what the guidelines are, I'd be open to potentially picking rentals back up in the fall.
How about we say we won't consider renting in beginning in August? We'll have a new plan, which most likely will include the fall. And if it turns out that it's bigger assembly things, then we could do some in August. But we could just say to people that ask, we're going to wait till August to begin to see what we're going to do, and not take reservations.
Mary, so when do we typically stop taking reservations?
For the Lakeside room, it's typically Columbus Day weekend is our last one. And for Cadogan Pavilion, it's about the same, and really about the same for the bandstand. We start closing down our seasonal restrooms in mid to late October.
All right. So I like that plan then. It's reevaluated in August.
Yeah.
All right, excellent. Shall we move on to facility reopen discussions?
Yes.
Okay, so as of today, or actually as of the 26th, currently open in town would include open spaces, the high school track, the boat ramp, and Williams Park tennis. And in looking at other communities that have already opened, bigger parts of their facilities or more of their facilities versus what we've been doing so far, something that I have noticed is that a lot of the other communities do have park ranger or monitor positions. And so basically right now in town, if we have staff there, or if the Parks Department is on site and they see somebody misusing a park or facility, we do take the time to educate them on what the proper use is. Because of the different restrictions that we have in place now and going forward for the next couple of months, it might be time for the town to consider even a temporary parks monitor or ranger position, and perhaps recommending something along those lines to the Board of Selectmen. And basically what I would envision this person to be would be really an ambassador, kind of going from facility to facility, checking in, making sure that people are following guidelines, and really educating people on what's acceptable use at the facilities. We do expect for that to change throughout the summer months as different aspects of facilities become open. So they could enforce any closures, promote social distancing, and we could also possibly even have them do some additional restroom cleaning, assuming that the restroom facilities at Cadogan and the Kids Kingdom area do open. So right now, as much as we'd like to say that we could do that in-house, we really can't. Might be reasonable to consider a combination of in-house OT on weekends if we already have people coming in doing other duties, to have them just lengthen their day to take on some of that, and then to have somebody different doing it during the week. But I do think that under COVID, that this might be an eligible expense for reimbursement from FEMA. It is very specific to the town's response to the pandemic, and so if the town were to incur this expense, I do think that it may be eligible for some reimbursement funding. So I wanted to kind of start there, because I think that when we do talk about reopening facilities, I think that enforcement is really a conversation that has to be done at the same time, because we can post and say and ask anything, but unless you have the ability to enforce, you really can't expect people to comply or everybody to comply.
No, it's very true.
Mary, can I add to that? I'm sorry. You know how I reached out to you last week that a friend of mine had reached out to me. She saw the boat gate open. She's since
Yes.
texted me tonight. She said she went by 3 times today, 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and 7 o'clock, and the gate was open each time. So that would be something I would think I would like to see a park ranger kind of keeping an eye out for as well.
I would fully support that, Sue. And the nice thing is that once we are open and operational at the beach, we do have that staff that does that. It's always an issue that we have before we have staff there full time for the season. But yes, I would agree. And we do our best. And we also ask our pass holders, you know, if they happen to pass by and they see it open, you know, to please close it for us and let us know. So we can try. But thank you for that information. That's really helpful, and we'll try to get our folks rotating through there a little bit more frequently in the interim.
Thank you.
Well, I like the idea of a ranger. I think that these times are unprecedented, and I think that, you know, enforcement is everything. And unfortunately, we just don't have enough staff to enforce some of these things. So I'm all for the idea. I don't know what the shape of it looks like. Full-time, part-time. Obviously, it's going to be somewhat temporary, hopefully. But I like the idea.
So, Mary, you're talking about opening things like Cadogan Park and the tennis courts. I know you're not doing basketball because of the nature of basketball. Are those the 2 areas you're thinking about opening?
Yeah, so we did successfully open Williams Park tennis. I do think that tennis is something that should be considered for the other sites. I do think that the high school tennis court should be considered next, and then likely Cadogan to follow. We could also consider doing Cadogan and the high school at the same time. The only reason why I would suggest perhaps doing the high school first is because I do know that we do have groups that tend to congregate at the Cadogan courts that don't tend to congregate at the high school courts. And so I think it just might, a good first step might be the high school with Cadogan to follow soon thereafter, after we have an opportunity to perhaps post some better information about guidance and have some ability to educate people on site about congregating, group use, doubles play, time on the courts. I think that it would be helpful to have some staff available to help with that as well at Cadogan.
So you were talking about the high school courts first, right?
Yes.
And it's weird when I play tennis at the high school courts, there's always people waiting. You know, there's always people waiting to get on, and that would be, you know, we chose to open our courts singles play only or family, like if you were in the same family, but doubles is okay. It's just, what are you going to do when there's always people waiting at the high school.
Don't they rotate every half hour, or they move to the next court, so you have one team coming on each time?
They do, but there could be 6 people waiting on the bench there. You know, that's why we went with singles, just to cut down on the number of people. On our 4 courts, there were a total of 8 people.
Right.
You don't think they social distance on the bench? We could take it off. I think to some degree, and probably I'm going to guess those waiting for a tennis court would self-police pretty well.
Yeah.
I mean, again, if we saw a crowd of 20 people waiting, we could change it up. But I'm going to guess if there were 6 to 8 people waiting, they would keep apart from each other.
So
it's a good place to start. Right?
We closed our courts because somebody was teaching a group lesson, ignoring our social distancing sign. We left it open for a couple of weeks. Somebody brought 8 kids there to teach a group lesson.
I'd like to say I'm surprised, Rob, but I totally can understand. And yeah, people certainly take liberties when they see an open court, no matter what you have posted or what you've asked. And so, I do think it's important. I think that folks in town definitely need some outlets. And I think that tennis is one of the safest opportunities that we can offer them. And so I would, really suggest that we recommend opening up the tennis courts at the high school soon as we can post and do a little bit of an education piece about what the expectation is. And I know, we would not be early in that regard. Danbury's already opened their courts. Newtown has, Ridgefield's opening June 1st. Wilton opened on May 15th. And I think, Rob, you opened back on May 20th. So we're very much in line. We're not going to be the trendsetters. I think it would be very much appreciated by people. And, USTA has some great information. I'm sure Rob has seen it and is probably using it at his facility too. An education piece about, how to safely play tennis, different precautions you can take, not changing the size of the court, bringing a fresh can of tennis balls with you, only picking up a ball that you have with your name on it. So there's different things that we can recommend that people do. Could we force anybody to follow those? No, but recommendations.
It's so much easier with singles. One person serves, the other person serves. To follow the USTA guidelines. But whatever you choose, I just think that opening all 6 courts at the same time would eliminate demand. It would mean that people go to the other court and it would create a line where maybe we don't need to. Especially if you have a monitor, that's...
Yeah. So I mean, as of right now, the town does not have a monitor station at the courts, and if we did have any kind of a park ranger or monitor, that person would be traveling throughout facilities, so they wouldn't be stationed at one site either. So the town could consider having a tennis monitor. I would like to think that people can do the right thing and can self-monitor in terms of singles or doubles. I know some communities have had some challenging conversations because we might have a family unit of 4 who want to play doubles, and we're telling them that they can't play as their family unit, that they have to only play 2 at a time. And so I can see, giving people some choice to play singles or doubles, I think at this point in time is reasonable. I think telling people, if possible, allow a court between you and the next person playing if the facility isn't busy. At Cadogan, we do have a group of pickleball players who do like to play there on a very regular basis. And I don't know how pickleball is going to be altered, if pickleball is going to be played more as a singles game or a doubles game, if pickleball is going to have the same level of interest at Cadogan and at other facilities, nearby in the short term. That's really the wild card in my mind about the use of Cadogan, and opening Cadogan certainly will relieve some of the pressure for tennis players from the high school, but it's also going to make us need to be able to educate pickleball players on the expectations for safe play.
I have an extremely active pickleball group that has indoor time 4 days a week. They're crazy. We got like 15, 20 of them. And the pickleball coordinator agreed to only have singles because 2 people on the pickleball court are way too close. So they were cooperative when I called them.
Yeah.
No, that's great. I actually was thinking that we should be posting that at the court and somehow trying to educate. We don't necessarily know who's playing pickleball. We don't have, that's not a Park and Rec program, so we don't have a direct way of reaching out to all of the pickleball players. We can certainly post through social media and on the website, but in my research, the Pickleball Association seems to recommend singles play at this time just because of the size of the court. that incidental contact, if you try to play doubles, is likely going to happen. So I think that would be reasonable for us to try to state that at Cadogan courts for sure.
The bigger question to me is Cadogan. You were saying family groups can use it for playing ball on the fields. Was that what, if I remember your proposal?
So, so right now there's a hard close on all parks and facilities. And so right now we're telling people that they can't go with their own child and kick a soccer ball. And at least in terms of what we're publicly saying, we're not giving people the option to go and to use any of the town facilities as a family. And so I think that we might want to discuss the idea of giving people the opportunity to use the facilities as families. A day at the park, you go, you spend time with your family, you're playing a game of catch, you're kicking around a ball, you're staying within your family unit, you're not intersecting necessarily with other people. But there's going to come a time where people just need to get out to parks and enjoy, and people are already doing that at open space facilities. I do know that Newtown has opened up their parks. Treadwell Park and Dickinson Park are both open. Those are just both larger areas. They don't have any restrictions on families using their softball field that's there. Of course, the playgrounds are still closed. The basketball courts are still closed, but they're actually encouraging families to get out and to use those wide open areas at the parks for family recreation.
Mary, Treadwell is open for pickleball to only Newtown residents. Is that something you would consider for Cadogan? Because pickleball people come from all over. You've got Newtown, you've got Danbury, they come from all over. Would you consider just Brookfield residents being able to use it?
Yeah, Sue, I think that. Thank you. I was going to say, certainly some other communities have put on residency restrictions on their courts and their programs and their facilities. I know that Newtown in particular, they have a parks sticker system so that you have to get your park sticker through Newtown. And if you're a non-resident, you can purchase a park sticker. They do have monitors who are actively looking for those stickers. And the monitor may not be on site every day, but they're on site enough to catch people who don't have the stickers. And so that's how Newtown has chosen to cater to mostly residents and not necessarily to non-residents. I do agree with you. I do know that pickleball is very much a multi-community effort, and I do know that we have people from many towns playing in Brookfield, and I'm sure that we have people from Brookfield playing in many different towns as well. So if we're going to limit pickleball to only residents, I'm not quite sure how we would go about enforcing that unless we turned it into a park and rec program. People had to register. We had an ability to, kind of program that space and the ability to go and to kind of spot check who else was there. That might be one way of managing that.
Right.
We made our tennis courts residents only. We made Topstone Park residents only, where normally it's for all, and we just do it on the, it's just on the honor system. But when people pull in with their New York license plates, that makes it really obvious. The one thing I wanted to mention was, I know families kick around a ball, and that's okay. That could be okay in the next round of iteration. And I fortunately have not seen anybody, whole group of 5-on-5 soccer, but I have seen people on my fields and in Brookfield, they go on with two friends, 40 feet apart, kicking a soccer ball in a big triangle. That's sort of the spirit of a family using it, but a small group of friends. It's when they play competitive and they're all bouncing against each other, battling for the ball, that it really causes the issue. I don't know where you draw the line or how you make a rule like that, but
Yeah, no, and you know, I know, again, not to just point to Newtown, but I did have a long conversation with them today. I know that in Newtown, they're enforcing that 5-person group. So again, according to the governor's executive order, you can be in a group with 5 people. They don't necessarily have to be in your family. You would only choose to talk to a group if they were exceeding that number of 5, and verify if they're a family unit or a household or not. But it all does go back to enforcement. And so at some point in time, you know, I feel like we need to really educate people on what the expectation is and why the expectation is there. It's really in people's best interest for health and safety, and then to really rely on people to do the right thing to some extent. I mean, we can't possibly be everywhere at every point in time. I do acknowledge that people need to be outside. We do want people to be outside. I think that the longer that people are kind of in their houses, the more people really do need to kind of get back out, and even just to be in a park is a different setting. You know, it's much different to go to a park than to be in your backyard. It's just that mental break from your regular routine. And I really feel like we're getting to the point where we really need to discuss how we can start making that happen in the next weeks as opposed to months. I really feel like it's going to be of huge value to people now that the weather is nice, to be able to just get out and get that change of scenery and enjoy the amenities as family units or in, you know, small groups that are underneath the executive order.
And Mary, I do know that the Parks and Rec director in Newtown has had problems with that 5-person rule, because you'll have a coach come with 5 kids. Well, that's 6 people, you know, so they're not necessarily, you know, understanding what the guidelines are.
Yeah, and John, I totally can understand how that would happen. So,
Yeah.
you know, I think that the big piece would be organized. So there's no organized. We're not talking about having a coach come. We're not talking about having anybody organizing a practice. We're talking
Right.
about a family coming. And again, it's really hard to enforce or to police. I have no doubt that the same thing has happened here in Brookfield. We just
Right.
haven't been seeing it. I mean, I've heard about it happening, but
Right.
we're not there to stop it, and you can't stop everything either. So,
Right.
so I think, you know, that there comes a point in time that the education component, you know, this is what we're asking you to do. This is why we're asking you to do it. We really need people to all be on the same page. We really want to have these facilities reopened. We want you to be able to come out and enjoy your facilities in the town. And this is what we need for you to do in order for us to be able to do that. And,
Right.
you know, I would hope that the vast majority of people would just choose to try to do the right thing. I mean, I really would like to think that.
I would hope so. You know, I don't know if people are following on Facebook that Belanda, the principal at the high school, offered last night a type of drive-through graduation on June 20th, where the family drives up, the kid gets out of the car, walks to the auditorium, takes a picture, and then gets back into the car. There's a complete uproar of people wanting to have all the kids on the football field, 6 feet apart, you know, with all the parents in the bleachers. So I think
Hey, Greg, we lost John.
Someone got the John.
Did he walk away too far, maybe?
I think he just muted himself.
Oh, he is muted, yeah.
Gregory?
Guys, we
there
are
we
gonna
go.
have
I'm back.
discussion
All
too.
right.
There you are.
Go ahead, John.
All right, I'm back. Sorry, I don't know where I left off. Did you hear
Football
me talk about
field.
that? Yeah, so you know, I mean, people want to have a full-blown, you know, graduation so that they can be with their friends and stuff, and it's just not possible to have 200 people gathered right now, or in 3 weeks on June 20th, and people don't understand that. So I think a lot of people are going to comply with what we try to do, and you know, and then there's going to be people that are going to ignore the rules. Just like I've seen people in Home Depot without masks, you know, so it's hard all the way around.
It gets back to what Mary said right at the beginning. All we can do is offer something for everybody where they are on the spectrum and the comfort level, and begin and go from there. And you know, we're going to find out where the problems are, but we won't do that until we kind of get started. But with that in mind, and perhaps one of the areas I'm worried that, you know, we will, the biggest test is the greenway.
Is the what?
Can we talk about the greenway, Mary, or we talked about the parks and whatnot to everybody's satisfaction?
Yeah.
I just want one question, Mary. Like, what's the timeline for like a baseball field opening to a team? It wouldn't be after June 20th, after the next phase. Am I correct? At least that's the earliest. Am I correct?
Yeah, so Tom, there was a little bit of a tease given out that on June 20th the governor would be giving more guidance about youth sports, and many of us assume that's going to refer to youth baseball or softball,
Right.
but we don't have really any real indication.
Okay.
What I do know now is that, you know, certainly nothing before that point,
Okay.
and that anything after that point would have to be that youth sports are considered, you know, permissible and allowed, and then would be permitted after whatever plan the youth sports comes up with is approved by, you know, our department and the health department for what kind of modifications they expect for the season. But I would expect that we're going to know more towards the end of this month about baseball and softball in particular.
So before that time before June 20th, no one can even have a practice, right? Am I correct about that?
Correct. So right now there's no
Okay.
permitted use of the fields by any organization.
Okay.
And by the governor's decree by executive order, you can only have a group of 5.
Right. Okay.
And so right now all the fields are closed for any kind of organized practices or games.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, Mary, it's Brian. I think you did a wonderful job putting this plan together. Really, it's solid, and you know what? It shows. You know, it shows a lot of work that you put into it. But one of the big messages that you're getting across to all of us is we have to remain flexible. You know what? And you know, as time passes, you know, we'll figure out the best approach. But you know, so far so good. It looks good, Mary. Thank you.
Thank
So
you, Brian.
Mary-
I really appreciate that.
What do you need? What do you need from us tonight in terms of, shall we just discuss, or not discuss, but decide that everyone agrees with Mary's layout here, knowing that the layout is very open by its nature, and just if anyone has a specific objection, so that Mary can move forward with these recommendations? Do you need us to make the recommendations, or you know, perhaps we shall maybe have a special meeting in 2 weeks when you need decisions from us? What do you need from us tonight in terms of perhaps a vote on something or an approval of something?
Thank you. Before we get to that point, I think it would be really valuable if we could have a discussion specific to the Still River Greenway, because I do think that it's its own entity, and there are no easy answers. But I would really value the ability to have everybody collaborate a little bit on that before we talk about the next step. Is that okay, Joey?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was wondering why I can't bring my dog on the Greenway on the 20th.
Okay, we'll make the exception for your adorable dog, John. Only
For
that
this
one, though.
puppy. Yeah,
How can you say no?
Just that one.
Tom's seen her.
Yeah. I already tell people I want to buy her.
So go ahead.
No, sorry.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so sorry. So, you know, the Greenway is challenging, and the reason why the Greenway is challenging is because it's so beloved. And what a great problem for our community to have is that we have something that's so beloved by so many people, not only in Brookfield, but throughout the area. And if I could tell you the number one phone call that we get on a daily basis in our office is a Greenway opening? When is it opening? We can't wait to go back. I had Lyme disease 3 years ago. I feel so much more comfortable being able to walk on the paved trail of the Greenway, and how valuable it is to people. So, you know, with that, we need to kind of start thinking about, okay, well, what's reasonable? The town has always been making decisions since the start of the pandemic based on public safety, and in the attempt to keep the public safe, as we learn more information. And so we do recognize, that there's going to come a time where we do start to have to make some tougher decisions, when exactly is the right time to start reopening any one of the facilities. And I think the Greenway is probably the most challenging of any of those, just because of the sheer usage numbers that we saw back in March. And we have no reason to expect that those numbers are going to be smaller when we choose to reopen. The big difference that I see between March and now is that back in March, we had really no real knowledge about how the coronavirus was spread. We were not having people wearing masks. We were not having people used to social distancing. And now I think that, we're more than 2 months in, and people have really gotten used to wearing masks, social distancing, being a little bit more careful when they're out in public. So I think that it's definitely time for us to start talking about the Greenway for those reasons. I put a kind of a somewhat arbitrary date down, on the information that I shared. And again, kind of going back to any time we open a facility, I think it's important that we open it during the week and not on a weekend. I think automatically you open on a weekend, you're going to just get a weekend crowd. During the week, you get a little bit of a softer opening no matter what the facility or the date is. So in trying to think of creative ways to keep capacity a little bit lower than maybe we saw in March, you start thinking about, okay, well, what would be reasonable? So would it be reasonable for us to not have dogs on the Greenway when we reopen? Right now, a lot of people choose to walk their dogs on the Greenway. A lot of people choose to stop and pet the adorable dogs like John has on his lap when they're on the Greenway. And those kinds of scenarios really create situations where social distancing is not being followed and is not possible. So if you take the dog out of the mix, well, all of a sudden those situations and those scenarios aren't happening on the Greenway, and maybe that's a safer option for step one. Something to think about, not a mandate, but it kind of sounds like, well, why in the world would you say no dogs? So that's kind of where that would come from, is that it would people would be more likely to pass each other faster because they're not stopping to talk and to pet the adorable pup.
Absolutely, especially when they're puppies. Yeah, absolutely.
Unless you get the right kind of dog, people will go faster.
Yeah. If you have a pit bull,
You get everybody walking faster.
they got a bad rap, pit bulls.
So the idea of maybe just opening at the start and asking people to use it for walking and running, no bikes, no scooters, no dogs, maybe a discussion worth having. Having people wear masks, wearing people wear a mask anytime social distancing isn't possible. So, people who are walking the Greenway at 6 o'clock in the morning and there's 3 other people there, do we think that they should have a mask on?
No,
Probably
I don't think
not.
so. Yeah.
But if there's, 400 people on the Greenway at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, that's a different situation. And yeah, I would say that yes, we should have the expectation that people are going to wear masks because they're going to be coming into contact with so many people in a closed area, even in the open air.
But there's no way. But there's no way, Mary. There's no way, Mary, to police that. Any of the aspects, whether it's somebody taking their dog on if they want to, even though they're not supposed to, and they don't read the sign, or they don't ride their bike and they don't read the sign. All of those aspects are really hard to enforce.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. And so that's kind of the catch-22, is that we need to find a way to reopen. We need to find a way to reopen as safely as possible, recognizing that most people will choose to comply. But not everybody will. And and what can we do to help people comply? Well, I think there's going to be a huge education component. I think that most people, again, I'd like to believe that people want to do the right thing. And so if we educate people on the reasons why these parameters are being set up, and that's because we want the Greenway to open, and we feel like it's a safer environment for most people if we do these things, I think that might make people want to work with us. I think that, and I'm so sorry, I just totally lost my train. I was on the train too.
People comply?
And then the other part would be the enforcement. So,
Right.
when we first reopen the Greenway, no matter when that is, if it's in 2 weeks, a month, or 3 months from now,
Right.
having the support of the police department for the first few days, and then probably randomly after that, I think would be a really big piece to make sure that whatever is being asked in terms of, for people to follow is actually being stated to them by people in authority at entrance points. I don't know if we could make it work without their assistance.
Doesn't the police department only have 3 people on staff 24/7?
I'm not sure if we'd be able to do a 24/7,
No.
and I can't speak to the staffing levels. Honestly, I don't know.
I believe that's what it is in town, that there's always 3 police officers on duty 24/7 year round. But
Renee, that was
you know,
awesome.
what did Renee do?
I'm sorry, John.
Photobombed by one of her kids.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I turned my I don't have her on. But yeah, I believe from talking to Robin Montgomery years back that was how many officers they had on staff 24/7. And there was always 3 officers on duty. So whether or not they would be able to, depending on what's going on in town, have somebody stationed there or not, that's up to Purcell.
Yeah, and again, I'm certainly not one to be able to speak on department staffing at the police department, but I do know that there are special duty officers that are hired for different occasions. Perhaps this would be a good occasion for the town to use special duty if necessary for the short term. If we can't accomplish that with current staffing.
That's true. We do hire, an off-duty police officer to control traffic at the Yankee Fair in October at our church. So that's definitely a possibility if we have, access to extra funds to do something like that. It certainly might bring a lot of comfort, to us as a commission and people using the Greenway as well.
One option, what you could do, Mary, is to open the Greenway, but don't open the parking lot.
That's what we talked about, is restricting parking, but
Yeah,
it's hard.
Don't open the parking lot. I mean, it will definitely limit the number of people who use the Greenway. It's funny.
They're gonna find another place to park.
Not always. I've been in there and told people, like, they're waiting for a spot in the parking lot. I told them they can park on the other side of the police station. They just leave. It's funny, if they can't park in the parking lot, they will not use the Greenway.
Really?
It's awesome.
They won't go to the north end of the Greenway?
No. They just, I mean, they could just park on the other side of the police station, and they won't do that. But I mean,
they're afraid of getting a ticket.
It's almost like a soft opening, where it is open, but it's not. Like
right.
I don't know. I think it would limit at the first week or two. It would definitely limit the number of people who use it.
Yeah.
Mary, you were limiting no dogs, no bicycles at the opening.
No scooters.
Yeah. Right. So I was thinking that those are good things for the first round, but it's good to think of the next round. So I was thinking at some point you might want to say, we're trying to think ahead. Like, you can say dogs could be permitted during a certain time, like
the early morning or something like that,
like up till 10 o'clock in the morning on weekdays, or something like that later. Like, you open the way you want, see how it goes, and you can say, it seems to be going well. We want to allow dogs Monday, Wednesday, Friday up till 10 in the morning. As there won't be a social distance, but they'll know what they're getting into. The other people who just want to walk will know what they're getting into. Just a thought.
No, that's a great thought, and I appreciate everybody's suggestions, because this is definitely something that many minds will be a part of formulating policy for, that, at least for a suggested policy. So the idea of closing the closest parking lot is certainly a valid one. The idea of having posted hours again, sometimes it's easier to enforce across the board. Like it's a little bit more clear, like there's just no dogs right now. And sometimes I think we can muddy the waters by trying to be kind and giving those times that we do allow things versus when we don't allow things. I think sometimes it gets, it's easy for people to get mixed up. But I agree. I mean, I think that, eventually we would want to be able to introduce all of the uses and users of the Greenway to be able to get back to how they would like to use the Greenway, and that would be our goal. And a step one for opening might be a little bit more restricted than we would really want to have, but maybe that's the best way for us to get it open in the short term, and then let that go for a few weeks and kind of phase it in, much like the state of Connecticut's been phasing in. They seem to be every 4 weeks, they're kind of going to the next phase. So maybe we say, okay, well, in order to open the Greenway, this is what we want to see for the first 4 weeks. Evaluate. We're going to know pretty quickly if it's working or not. And if it's not working, I know the town's been very good about making really difficult decisions and closing facilities that are beloved in the best interest of people who are using them. And so, but we'll know that quickly. So maybe the best way is to open with restriction. Say we're going to evaluate how use is going over the first month. We have our next commission meeting at the end of June. Perhaps we can talk more about what we think the step 2 is and make recommendations on a step 2. But I like the direction that the folks on the commission are going in, and I think this is all just great information for us to be discussing. A lot of people in town I know have different opinions. Residents only. We all can appreciate it's really challenging to enforce residents only. As much as it's probably even more so challenging to enforce residents only than it is to enforce no dogs or no bikes. I think that might be the easier enforcement, honestly. But there's no easy answer. There's no right answer. We just need to try to figure out a way to open, to serve as many people as we can in the most reasonable way possible. And so if anybody else has other suggestions, I would truly love to hear them. I think this is a great discussion.
Is there anybody who disagrees with opening the Greenway under these restrictions on June 10th or thereabouts? Is there anybody who's against it, who doesn't want it open?
I don't think I'm against it. I think the only thing that I can say is that we should open it with the understanding that if people don't exercise social distancing or follow the guidelines, that, we have the right to close it if need be.
Yeah.
And you may have said that, Mary.
You said it better, John. Thank you.
Okay.
I think it's a great way to show that, again, as the Parks and Rec department, we're trying. I mean, we want to open these things up to the public safely, but it really, ironically, I mean, how the public behaves really does determine what we can do, and not the other way around. So let's begin, and if it goes nuts, it's very easy for us to say that this is what's happening and it's not safe. But
yeah,
I'm all for beginning. We don't know until we try, and it's a good time to start trying carefully.
Great.
So, Mary, is there anything is that enough feedback for you to move forward? Or is there something in particular with everything we discussed that we need to vote on? Or is it enough that you right now have our support to, kind of start to go down the path with this plan, knowing that it's fluid and flexible?
Yeah. Thank you, Joey. So if not to put words in anybody's mouths, but if I'm understanding that the kind of general consensus from the commission is that the commission is open to the idea of Parks and Recreation offering a combination of both in-person and virtual camps, provided that we're following guidance from CDC and under the permission of our health department, that would be acceptable for the Park and Rec Commission for us to offer in-person experiences.
I agree.
I do too.
Yep, I agree.
And then I guess under beach operations, that the commission would generally agree that we should focus our efforts on recreational swimming and enjoyment of the park, and not offer swimming lessons or swim team at this time. Work on capacity, work on how to serve our residents first, while also serving our past Bethel pass holders, and then more discussions to follow in terms of any kind of visitor pass capacity at the gate, because that could be a step 2 for our next meeting. Is that where we're at on that as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
I
Okay.
agree.
Steady as you go.
For concerts, that we're open to having concerts in person with the maximum to not exceed the guidelines set by executive order, which we expect to be 50 on June 20th, and subject to further lifting likely at the end of July, but we would be keeping in order and not to exceed those numbers on site, with a virtual option for others. And that's agreeable to folks?
Yes.
Yes.
That we would suggest to the Board of Selectmen that the town consider funding a position for a parks monitor or ranger to help assist with education and enforcement of any restrictions on group sizes for the short term until they're lifted over the course of the summer. That would be a reasonable ask of the Park and Rec Commission to the Board of Selectmen.
No, that certainly makes sense.
This person would move around the town. It wouldn't be assigned to any one place, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Correct.
Of course. Yeah.
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 And
Mary,
that
sorry, I have a question about
yes.
that real quick. Did you
Yes.
mention like the hours? Is this like 12 to 7, 12 to 6, 1 to 6? What hours would you think they'd be
Yeah.
going around?
Thank you. You know what, Rob? Honestly, I didn't have set hours in my head. I do know that at least we have some eyes and ears on the ground up until the time that that the Parks Department leaves at 3. So probably something a little bit more like a 12 to 7, something like that, maybe covering the afternoon into the early evening hours when we don't have any eyes right now, would be probably where I'd fall. Probably would want to give it a little bit of thought and see what other people in other communities do, and if they might have better ideas that are tried and proven that I just don't know about yet. But I would say afternoon into early evening.
Good. Then you got my thumb up.
Thank you, Mary. Yep.
And then last but not least, the idea that the commission is opening to a gradual reopening of facilities, tennis courts first, then use of parks or fields by family units, followed by use of fields by permit once restrictions are lifted on youth sport groups or adult sport groups by executive order going forward. And playgrounds and basketball courts to remain closed for the time being, and that we do have some ideas for the Still River Greenway, some suggestions to bring forward about ways that we think capacity could be reduced, and ask for help with enforcement and education of that as well. Not sure about the timeline that folks were thinking about for the Greenway, if we would be thinking about something to happen before or after the June 20th date that we expect for the next level of restrictions to be lifted by the governor's office, but might be helpful to get a feeling just from the commission if we're thinking before or after that June 20th date.
I'm willing to go with before the date with the restrictions that you have. I think there's a lot of dog walkers, and I feel as a dog walker sad about that. I realize it's kind of a tool for controlling capacity. And so I think I'm comfortable starting earlier with your restrictions. But again, I think it's really going to be we have no idea in a week after that, we may say never mind. So I'm willing to try earlier.
I would only be okay with after, before the June 20th date, as long as we have support from the Brookfield PD.
Oh, good point. Good point, especially in the initial day or couple of days, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Anybody else?
I'm in favor.
I'm in favor with or without support because I have a feeling they're not going to provide somebody. But I think June 10th is reasonable with the 5-person limit, with signage, you know. But it'd be great if they could do it, but I'm not optimistic.
No, nobody reads signs or obeys signs. At least 60% of the population. But that's my view. That's my opinion.
All right, Kathy? You're good?
The only thing I would say is I think it might be a good idea to ask people to wear masks. Even if you say it's the off hours, they'll still have one with them if you put
Yes.
it out there. Because when people do pass, if someone's running and they're droplets spray when you're running. So for the safety of walkers, if you're going to be passed by a runner, you might want to be able to throw your mask on. So if you ask people to wear masks, they may take it off if it's not necessary. But at least
And it's still part of the state regulation. If you're out, you're supposed to be wearing a mask.
Well, that's a good point, Cassie. If we reopen the Greenway saying you're welcome to use a Greenway, but wear a mask, then maybe more people will be willing to do it because we're going to open it.
Mhm.
I think you ask for a lot in the beginning, at least, and then if they
That's right, I agree.
some people are going to be non-compliant, you know. And
Sure.
That's gonna
5% of the population is going to be.
But I think to ask for a mask is, I think you should.
Oh, right now, it's the expectation.
Yeah. Cassie, I totally agree with you. And when I was speaking before in my mind, and you can't read my mind, I had, help people kind of pull down their masks under their chin and then they kind of pull it up when they need to. So that's kind of what I was thinking. I totally agree. Like people should have a mask on site with them when they're on the Greenway, 100%. Yeah.
And Mary, if I could add, I reached out to the 15 or so other greenways and trails in the census group, and I heard back from about 5. All of them said that masks are required. People don't put them on when it's not busy or whatever, but they said that the compliance, because many of these trails are not as busy as ours and they've stayed open, the compliance with the mask, I am told, was very good. So I absolutely think that we should require masks and go from there.
Thank you. And just so I'm clear, I mean, people agree generally that it's better for us to, do the masks and then the other restrictions on top at opening, and then to be able to relax those going forward. Like that just wearing masks is not enough for our step 1. I just want to make sure everybody is in agreement that we need to have more than just that in order to open. Is that where people are?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You'll cut
Agreed.
down half the people just by not allowing dogs. That'll make it half just to start. That'll be fine. Then you can figure it out from there.
Okay, thank you. I just want to be very clear because, I think it's this is probably one of the more important meetings that I'm ever going to be a part of in terms of us trying to start the reopening process, both with programs and facilities. And certainly I know the Board of Selectmen is going to be looking forward to the input from the Park and Rec Commission, and then collaborating with the Director of Health and what we can do according to the guidelines. But this has just been a great meeting, and I just want to thank you all very, very much for all of your dedication and reading through and working through all this, because I know we've been on here for a very long time, and it's hard to talk for this long a time on such challenging topics. But I'm just very grateful for that. So thank you.
You're welcome, Mary.
You're welcome, man.
Thank you, Mary. You've done a fabulous job.
Truly fabulous.
Did we just make a motion to adjourn or somebody?
I think we did.
Can I make the first motion?
Well, I would like to, before we adjourn, I would like to just thank Mary, because these are uncharted times, and and I've seen her pilot there at the Parks and Rec building on Sundays, even still. So I know she's working really hard, and it's there's tons of tough decisions to make. So I would just like to commend Mary on all the effort that she's putting in during these times before we go ahead and say goodbye.
Thank you, Mary.
Mary, you
Thank
thought
you.
the macroburst was your big issue.
Your last name is not Poppins, is it?
So who would like to make a motion?
I'd like to make the first motion to adjourn that I've ever done in my 20 years here.
I think it was the second. I think
Renee, are you okay with that?
Wow,
All
are
right.
we in the land of Oz?
And Renee, are you seconding?
I'll second.
Okay.
All in favor?
All right, all in favor?
All right.
Bye.
Good to see everybody. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
All
Thanks.
Right.
Bye, everyone.
right.
Oh my God.
Hey, Gregory?
Live stream's been terminated. I know, I'm watching. Live stream's terminated. You're good.
Over 2 hours.
Greg, thank you so much for moderating.
Oh, of course, Mary, you did an awesome job. You did a great job providing this. I had no prior knowledge of any of this, and I feel like I'm an expert now.
Yeah, let's not lay it on too thick, everyone. Let's not let it go on.
Well done, Mary. You sounded great.
Thank
That was
you.